On the morning of March 14, 2024, emergency responders arrived at a sprawling Florida estate overlooking the Atlantic. Inside, they found the body of Gregory Moses, a 71-year-old billionaire real estate magnate, unresponsive in his bed. His 21-year-old wife, Jaime Brooke Moses, stood in the doorway crying, insisting she had tried everything to wake him. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no weapons, just a lifeless body and a grieving widow. What began as a routine death investigation would soon expose a calculated plot involving poisoned drinks, fabricated affection, and a trail of digital evidence that painted a chilling portrait of premeditated murder. This is the true story of how wealth, loneliness, and manipulation converged in one of Florida's most disturbing cases, a dark history lesson in trust, greed, and the price of vulnerability. Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. To understand how Gregory Moses ended up dead in his mansion, we must first understand the world he was born into, a world built on grit, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of legacy. Gregory's story begins not with him, but with his father, Jaime Moses, a man who dragged himself out of poverty through sheer determination and an obsession with control. Jaime Moses was born in 1922 in rural Georgia, the son of a housekeeper and a field laborer. The family lived in a one-room house with no electricity and no running water. Jaime grew up watching his parents struggle for every penny, and that struggle ignited a fire in him, a vow that he would never live that way. By his 20s, Jaime had begun working multiple jobs, washing cars and selling used appliances, learning the art of negotiation and profit. By the late 1940s, he had saved enough to start flipping properties, turning modest investments into substantial returns. His drive was relentless. He believed that poverty was a choice, that anyone with enough willpower could escape it. In 1948, Jaime met Melissa, a sharp, organized woman from a similar background. They married quickly. Their ambitions aligned. Together, they expanded from flipping houses to managing real estate portfolios, eventually investing in commercial properties that shaped their growing empire. Jaime's obsession with building wealth wasn't just about comfort. It was about creating a fortress that could protect his family for generations. He wanted to ensure that no child of his would ever feel the sting of deprivation he had endured. In 1950, Jaime and Melissa had their first child, a daughter named Joy. Jaime loved his daughter, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the family legacy was incomplete without a male heir. In the culture of mid-century America, particularly among self-made men like Jaime, sons carried the family name forward. Daughters, no matter how capable, were expected to marry and take another man's name. Jaime made it clear to Melissa that their empire needed a son to inherit it. He worked even harder, driven by the belief that one day he would hand over everything to a boy who would carry the Moses name into the future. Melissa endured 2 stillbirths in the years that followed, and each loss deepened Jaime's anxiety. He poured himself into his work, expanding faster, taking bigger risks, convinced that success would compensate for the absence of a male heir. Then, in February 1953, after nearly a decade of waiting, Jaime and Melissa finally had a son. Gregory Moses was born in a small private hospital, and Jaime held the tiny baby in his arms with a sense of triumph. This was the moment he had been working toward. This was the son who would take over. Gregory's birth wasn't just a family event. It was the fulfillment of Jaime's vision. He whispered to the newborn, "This is it, son. This is the start of something bigger than any of us." Jaime's eyes didn't leave Gregory's face, as if trying to transfer the weight of his empire in that single look. Gregory Moses grew up surrounded by wealth, privilege, and expectation. From an early age, he was given everything: tutors, private schools, luxury cars before he could even drive. Jaime didn't just want Gregory to be successful, he wanted him to be unstoppable. Gregory was taught that wealth wasn't just a means to live comfortably, it was a means to command. By the time Gregory turned 16, Jaime had already begun grooming him for leadership. Gregory attended elite business seminars, sat in on corporate meetings, and learned the art of negotiation from his father. Jaime drilled one rule into Gregory's head: Never get anyone pregnant outside of marriage. That was the boundary. Everything else, the women, the parties, the indulgence, was fair game. Shaw had built an empire and he wanted Gregory to enjoy it, but not recklessly. Gregory learned to see the world through his father's eyes. Money was power. Women were conquests. Loyalty was something you bought, not something you earned. By the time Gregory was 18, he had absorbed these lessons completely. In 1971, Gregory Moses enrolled in a prestigious university where he studied strategic global trade and behavioral markets, a unique course combining economics, psychology, and negotiation. It was a perfect fit for a young man who understood how to manipulate systems and sway people. But Gregory wasn't just interested in academics. The campus was a playground for the elite, and Gregory quickly became the center of attention. His wealth and charm made him a magnet for women who craved luxury and power. His first casual relationships were nothing more than byproducts of his lifestyle. He met women at crowded clubs, private gatherings, and yacht parties, places where status mattered more than substance. Gregory, with his sharp suits and easy smile, quickly became a legend in those circles. He gave expensive gifts, paid for vacations to exotic destinations, and treated his conquest to dinners at five-star restaurants. But it never meant more than the next thrill. One weekend, Gregory found himself aboard a yacht off the coast of Santa Monica, surrounded by models, actresses, and socialites. He was the life of the party, the man everyone wanted to be around. One of his first affairs was with a married socialite who was willing to leave her husband for a taste of Gregory's world. "What's the point of money if you don't use it to get what you want?" Gregory told her as they stood on the deck, champagne in hand, staring at the Los Angeles skyline. That night they both took what they wanted, no strings attached. Gregory's confidence, mixed with his ability to give women everything they desired, made him irresistible. He thrived in this chaos, carefully managing his affairs like business transactions. Nothing, it seemed, could slow him down. His father had shown him that control was everything, and Gregory had taken it a step further. He wasn't just navigating the world, he was owning it. By the time Gregory graduated in 1975, his reputation as a wealthy womanizer was firmly established. He wasn't just the rich kid with a powerful last name, he was a man who could get anything he wanted, and he did. His life was one of indulgence, carefully crafted excess, and a string of women who served as little more than entertainment. Gregory moved through the business world with the same confidence he had in his personal life. He joined his father's company, taking on larger responsibilities and expanding the empire into new markets. Shaw watched with pride as his son proved himself capable. Gregory had the intelligence, the ambition, and the ruthlessness necessary to carry the Moses name forward. But Shaw also noticed something troubling. Gregory seemed incapable of forming deep connections. He kept people at arm's length, always fearful of being betrayed or used. Shaw had taught him to be careful, but perhaps he had taught him too well. In 1986, Shaw Moses died in a tragic car accident on a rain-slicked highway outside Austin, Texas. His car skidded off the road, hit a guardrail, and Shaw died instantly. Gregory, then 33 years old, received the call while he was at a business conference in New York. The man who had been the driving force behind the family's fortune was gone. Gregory was suddenly the head of an empire. The inheritance was vast: real estate holdings, companies, investments worth billions, all placed squarely in Gregory's hands. He inherited the family business, the mansion, the luxury cars, and the controlling stake in a legacy that spanned decades. At first, the transition seemed seamless. Gregory didn't need to reinvent the wheel. He already knew how to grow what his father had built. Under Gregory's leadership, the empire expanded further and faster. He used his sharp mind and the power of his inheritance to buy out competitors, take risks that others wouldn't, and solidify his control over the family's holdings. The business world watched in awe as Gregory Moses stepped into his father's shoes without missing a beat. But with this newfound power came a different kind of freedom, one that unleashed a darker side of Gregory. As the months passed, the man who had inherited a fortune began to indulge in it more recklessly. Gregory's parties became legendary. Private yachts, sprawling estates in Malibu, exclusive clubs where he rubbed shoulders with Hollywood's elite. The women who filled those parties were just as extravagant. Actresses, models, businesswomen, and even high society wives flocked to him, drawn not only by his wealth but by the power and confidence that came with it. Gregory didn't just live in luxury, he reveled in it. He began boasting privately to friends that he had slept with over 4,000 women, a claim he repeated so often that it became part of his public persona. To him, it wasn't just about the women, it was about the power he wielded over them. The press, always hungry for scandal, dubbed him America's lust billionaire. It wasn't just a title, it became part of his brand, a symbol of his untamed desire for control and indulgence. Despite all this, there were those who questioned him, especially his longtime friend David Hurton. David, another heir to a wealthy family, was everything Gregory was not. Where Gregory was bold and brash, David was reserved and rational. Their friendship, forged in the early days of Gregory's rise, was built on mutual respect. But it was clear that David didn't share Gregory's approach to life. One evening, as they sat on Gregory's balcony overlooking the city, David couldn't hold back any longer. "Greg," he said, his voice serious, "why not settle down with just one woman? Someone who will take care of you, satisfy your needs, and make life a little simpler." Gregory, lounging in his chair with a glass of scotch in hand, laughed it off. "You know what happens to men like us after a divorce, David," he replied, his tone flat, almost detached. "Half the empire, man, half of everything I built. I'm not risking that." David frowned, leaning forward slightly. "But what's the point of all this, Greg?" he asked. "All the wealth, the women, the fame. What's it worth if you can't trust anyone?" Gregory didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the city lights below. For a moment there was a pause, a tension in the air. Then he finally spoke, his voice steady. "You see, David," he said, "trust doesn't matter when you have everything. You don't need anyone but yourself to control this world. I've seen what happens to men who tie themselves down. They lose it all." David shook his head, disappointed but not surprised. Gregory had always believed that control was everything, and his fear of losing it was what kept him from ever truly settling down. The years passed. Gregory continued to expand the Moses empire, acquiring properties, investing in technology startups, and diversifying into international markets. He was brilliant in business, but his personal life remained a revolving door of temporary relationships. Women came and went, each one believing, at least for a moment, that she might be different. But Gregory never let anyone too close. He surrounded himself with people who admired him, but who also knew their place. Gregory didn't want love. He wanted loyalty. Loyalty that could be bought, controlled, and kept at a distance. By the time Gregory reached his late 60s, he had amassed a fortune estimated at over $3 billion. His empire stretched from Florida to California, with holdings in commercial real estate, luxury resorts, and private equity. He lived in a sprawling mansion overlooking the Atlantic, drove a fleet of exotic cars, and traveled the world on private jets. To the outside world, Gregory Moses had it all. But those closest to him knew the truth. He was lonely. The endless parade of women had become exhausting. The parties had lost their luster. Gregory was beginning to realize that all the money in the world couldn't fill the void left by a lifetime of transactional relationships. It was during this period of quiet desperation that Gregory Moses met Jaime Brooke. To understand how Jaime came to be in Gregory's life, we must first understand where she came from, a place far removed from the glittering world of wealth and privilege. Jaime Brooke was born in 2003 in a small town in Louisiana, the daughter of a truck driver and a waitress. Her childhood was marked by instability and trauma. Her father, a man plagued by his own demons, sexually abused her beginning when she was 12 years old. This betrayal, which should have been met with protection and intervention, was instead ignored by her mother, who was consumed by drug addiction. Jaime, a young girl desperate for safety, found none. By the time she was 14, Child Protective Services removed her from the home and placed her in foster care. But the system, overburdened and underfunded, failed her. At 16, Jaime ran away, unable to trust the very institutions meant to protect her. Living on the streets, Jaime had no choice but to rely on survival tactics. She began dancing at local clubs to make ends meet. The men she encountered were often looking for something beyond dancing, and Jaime quickly learned to exploit that. She didn't just dance, she became the object of their desires, playing the game that survival demanded. By 18, Jaime had stepped into a new world, one that would shape her future for years to come. She became a high-end exotic dancer, working at exclusive clubs in New Orleans where wealthy men came to unwind. Surrounded by luxury and excess, it was here in these dark corners of nightlife that Jaime honed her skills of manipulation. She learned to read men, to understand what they wanted and how to give it to them without ever revealing her true self. By 21, she had mastered the art of deception. She knew how to make a man feel like the only one in the room, how to pretend to be what they craved without ever exposing the darkness that had shaped her own life. Reports from those who knew her during this period describe Jaime as charming, adaptable, and emotionally intelligent. She could shift her persona to match whoever was in front of her. To some, she was the innocent girl who needed saving. To others, she was the sophisticated companion who understood the finer things in life. This chameleon-like quality would serve her well when she met Gregory Moses. In early 2023, Jaime was working at an upscale gentleman's club in Miami when Gregory Moses walked in. He was there for a private event celebrating a business deal with a group of investors. Jaime was assigned to his table. From the moment she sat down, she understood who he was, not just a wealthy man, but a lonely one. Gregory, accustomed to women who fawned over his wealth, was surprised by Jaime's approach. She didn't immediately flatter him or ask about his money. Instead, she asked him about his interests, his thoughts on art and architecture, his travels. She listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face, making him feel heard in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Gregory was drawn to her immediately. She wasn't like the others. She seemed genuinely interested in him as a person, not just as a bank account. Over the following weeks, Gregory returned to the club multiple times, always requesting Jaime. They began talking outside the club, meeting for coffee, then for lunch. Jaime carefully crafted her persona. She was soft-spoken, humble, and emotionally intelligent. Her charm was subtle yet effective. She mirrored Gregory's need for validation, making him feel like the most important man in the room. What Gregory didn't know was that this soft-spoken woman was hiding a past darker than he could imagine. Jaime's broken childhood wasn't something she shared with him immediately. She presented herself as someone who had overcome hardship through strength and determination, carefully omitting the details of abuse and survival that had truly shaped her. Gregory, in turn, was captivated. For the first time in years, he found himself thinking about someone constantly. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was emotional intimacy, something Gregory hadn't known he was craving. He began inviting Jaime to private yacht cruises, intimate gatherings, and exclusive restaurants. They started spending more time together away from the public eye. The more time they spent together, the more their connection seemed to grow. Jaime, for her part, continued to play her role perfectly. She never seemed impressed by his wealth or status. Instead, she made him feel as if he mattered for who he was, not what he owned. Within 2 months of their first meeting, Gregory was convinced that Jaime was the one. It was as if everything had fallen into place. He didn't hesitate. In September 2023, Gregory proposed to Jaime in grand style. He arranged a lavish dinner at a private estate overlooking the water, surrounded by chandeliers, musicians, and the finest food money could buy. To the public, it was a spectacle. A 70-year-old billionaire getting engaged to a 21-year-old woman. The media had a field day speculating on the reasons behind their whirlwind relationship. Was it true love, or was it something else entirely? To those close to Gregory, the engagement seemed like a disaster waiting to happen. David Hurton, Gregory's longtime friend, was the first to express his concerns. "Greg, you've spent your whole life avoiding this," David said one evening over drinks. "You've never been the marrying type. Why now? Do you really know her, man? I've seen this before. It never ends well." Gregory, however, was undeterred. He brushed off David's words with a laugh, dismissing the concerns as unfounded. "I know what I'm doing," Gregory replied confidently. "Jaime's different. She's not like the others." But David, always the more rational one, wasn't convinced. "They're all different until they're not," he said quietly. Despite the warnings, Gregory's mind was made up. He had found someone who made him feel alive again, someone who made him believe in the possibility of real love. For Gregory, the future looked bright, bright enough that he was willing to ignore the doubts that lingered in the back of his mind. The wedding of Gregory Moses and Jaime Brooke took place in December 2023, and from the moment the invitations were sent out, the world was watching. The venue was a lavish estate in Palm Beach, meticulously decorated with intricate floral arrangements and crystal chandeliers that sparkled in the evening light. The guest list included celebrities, business moguls, politicians, and members of high society. But none of that mattered to Gregory as he stood at the altar, his heart racing with excitement. This was his moment. Jaime walked down the aisle in a custom-made gown, the fabric shimmering under the soft lighting, her face glowing. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated everyone, it was the way she looked at Gregory, her eyes filled with what appeared to be genuine admiration and warmth. To Gregory, this was more than just a wedding. It was a declaration of everything he had worked for. In Jaime, he believed he had found someone who loved him for who he was, not for his wealth or status. The vows were simple and heartfelt. Gregory, with his deep voice and unwavering confidence, spoke of his love for Jaime, of how she had brought a new light into his life. Jaime, in turn, spoke softly, her words filled with what seemed like sincerity, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. It was the start of a new chapter for both of them. The reception was just as extravagant, with champagne flowing freely and the dance floor filled with laughter and joy. Gregory and Jaime danced together, their eyes locked, their movements in sync. It was a moment of pure bliss, a moment where nothing else mattered but the love they appeared to share. Gregory had never been happier. For the first time in years, he felt complete. The honeymoon that followed was equally lavish. The couple boarded a private jet to the Caribbean, where they spent their days in a secluded villa perched on a cliff with breathtaking views of the ocean. They lounged by the pool, enjoyed each other's company, and dined under the stars. To anyone who saw them, they were the epitome of a perfect couple, blissful, content, and deeply in love. Jaime continued to play her role effortlessly, making Gregory feel like the most important man in the world. The media, once skeptical, began to soften their tone. They saw the posts Jaime shared on social media, smiling photos with Gregory, each image painting a picture of a perfect marriage. People who had once questioned their relationship now began to rethink their assumptions. Maybe this wasn't just another impulsive marriage. Maybe this was the real thing. David Hurton, Gregory's longtime friend, couldn't help but notice the change in Gregory. For years, David had seen his friend avoid commitment like the plague. But now David saw a man who was genuinely happy. One night, as they caught up over drinks, David looked at Gregory with a smile. "You know, Greg," he said, "I've never seen you this happy. This marriage, maybe it's good for you. Look at what you've been missing. This is what you've been waiting for, isn't it?" Gregory, his usual confidence tempered by the softness of the moment, nodded. "Yeah," he said, a content smile on his lips. "This is what I've been waiting for." The happiness was evident. To Gregory, this marriage wasn't just a union. It was a realization of everything he had been searching for in life. He had finally found someone who loved him for who he was, or so he believed. As the weeks passed, their bond appeared to grow stronger. Gregory was no longer just the billionaire who had it all. He was a man who had finally found love. To Jaime, the future seemed just as bright. The life she had always dreamed of was now hers, wrapped up in a marriage to one of the wealthiest men in the world. But beneath the surface, a different reality was taking shape, one that Gregory could not yet see. 2 months into the marriage, in late February 2024, Gregory's life seemed to have settled into a comfortable routine. He and Jaime spent their days enjoying the luxury of their private estate, hosting intimate dinners, and taking weekend trips on his yacht. But one quiet afternoon, while they were relaxing in the garden, something unexpected happened that would later take on a much darker significance. Gregory called out to his beloved dog Leo. Leo, a golden retriever who had been by Gregory's side for over a decade, didn't respond as eagerly as usual. Instead of bounding over with his tail wagging, the dog moved slowly, lethargically. There was something off about his movements, something Gregory couldn't quite place. "Leo," Gregory called again, his voice filled with concern as he watched his dog struggle to stand. Leo, usually so full of energy, now appeared sluggish and distant. His coat, once bright and healthy, looked dull. His usual spark was missing, replaced with a tired, almost vacant gaze. It was a stark contrast to the dog Gregory had known for years, a dog who had been more than a pet, but a true companion. Leo had been with him through thick and thin, loyal and unwavering. Jaime, noticing Gregory's worried expression, walked over to Leo and knelt beside the dog. She ran a gentle hand through his fur, trying to comfort both Gregory and the animal. "He probably just has a fever," she said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "I'll take him to the vet tomorrow. It's probably nothing." Gregory nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had spent years with Leo, and never once had he seen the dog so weak, so distant. But trusting Jaime's judgment, he pushed the worry aside for the moment. He believed it was just a passing illness, something that could be easily fixed with a visit to the veterinarian. The next morning, however, the unthinkable happened. Gregory woke up to an empty house. The quiet was unlike any other morning. He walked into the living room and immediately noticed something was wrong. Leo's bed was empty. His heart sank. He rushed to where his dog had slept, only to find Leo lying still, lifeless. The dog that had been his companion for over 10 years was gone. Jaime was standing nearby, her expression calm, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Maybe he's just old," she said, her voice soft, almost casual. "Dogs don't live forever, you know." Gregory didn't respond immediately. He stood there, staring at Leo, the weight of the loss sinking in. Leo had been more than just a pet. He had been part of Gregory's world, a constant in a life filled with unpredictability. Gregory's connection to Leo was deep, and to lose him so suddenly left a hollow feeling that he couldn't ignore. But Jaime's words, though simple, seemed to provide the comfort he needed at the moment. He didn't question it. Instead, he decided to bury Leo on the estate. It was the least he could do for the dog who had been his loyal companion for so many years. As Gregory worked quietly to dig the grave, Jaime remained by his side, offering soft words of encouragement. She knew how much Leo meant to Gregory, and though her comfort was calm and composed, it felt almost mechanical. She was there, but her mind seemed elsewhere, never fully present in the grief of the moment. After Leo was laid to rest, the house fell silent. Gregory took a moment to reflect on the dog's life, the loyalty and companionship that Leo had given him. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but Gregory wasn't someone who liked to dwell on such losses. He had too much going on, too many responsibilities to let something like this slow him down. He knew that Jaime, ever supportive, was there to guide him through it. He had married her for a reason. She had made him feel loved and cared for, a feeling he hadn't had in years. Her presence was comforting, and as he stood there beside Leo's grave, he allowed himself to feel the brief sting of loss before moving forward. 1 month after Leo's death, in mid-March 2024, Gregory's life seemed to have settled back into its normal rhythm. The initial grief had faded, replaced by the demands of managing his business empire and his life with Jaime. He threw himself into work, focusing on expanding his holdings and enjoying the luxury his wealth afforded him. But despite the outward appearance of stability, Gregory couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Over the past few weeks, he had been feeling unusually fatigued, experiencing a sense of pressure in his chest that wouldn't go away. He brushed it off at first, attributing it to the stress of his hectic schedule, but the feeling only intensified. One evening, as Gregory sat at his desk, his hand pressed against his chest in discomfort, Jaime noticed his unease. She had become adept at reading him, understanding his moods and how to respond to his needs. "You should take it easy, Greg," she said softly, her tone laced with concern as she approached him. "You've been working non-stop. Let me make you your usual drink. It'll help you relax." Gregory, though tired, smiled at her, appreciating her attentiveness. "I'm fine, Jaime. Just a little worn out." "I'll be all right," he reassured her, trying to push aside the discomfort. But Jaime insisted. She knew what he liked, a strong, expensive cocktail that he had become accustomed to over the years. A simple drink, but it was something that relaxed him after a long day. As she prepared the drink in the kitchen, her movements were careful and deliberate. She knew that Gregory trusted her, that he relied on her to take care of him. She handed him the drink, her fingers brushing against his as she passed it to him. He took a sip, savoring the familiar taste, and after a moment settled back in his chair, sighing with relief. "You're right," he said, his voice softer now. "I just need to rest. It's been a long day." With that, Gregory went to bed, the weight of exhaustion pulling him under. He didn't know that the drink Jaime had given him contained something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. As he lay down, the pressure in his chest seemed to ease, and for the first time in days, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. But that calm was fleeting. As the hours passed, Gregory drifted into an unnaturally deep sleep. His breathing became shallow, his heart rate slowed. By the early hours of March 14, 2024, Gregory Moses was no longer alive. The next morning, when Gregory didn't answer her calls, Jaime entered the bedroom. She shook him gently at first, then more urgently, but he remained unresponsive. Her hands trembled, whether from genuine shock or calculated performance only she would know, as she reached for her phone and dialed 911. "Greg, please wake up," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please." The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Gregory's heart had stopped. His body had shut down. Despite their best efforts, CPR, oxygen, defibrillation, he didn't make it. Jaime stood nearby, her hands clasped in front of her, crying hysterically. "Please, no, this can't be happening," she sobbed. Gregory Moses, the billionaire whose empire stretched across the country, was dead. The news of Gregory's sudden death sent shockwaves through the community. How could someone so powerful, so vital, simply die in the middle of the night? It didn't make sense. And yet, here was the body of a man whose wealth and apparent health had seemed to guarantee a long life, now cut short without explanation. Detective Sarah Harris was assigned to the case. A veteran investigator with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, Sarah had seen her share of suspicious deaths among the wealthy, but something about this one felt different from the start. She arrived at the mansion in the late morning, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. There were no signs of violence, no forced entry. It didn't appear to be a robbery or a break-in. The house was in perfect order, just as it always had been. Gregory's wealth had never been under threat in any obvious way. There were no indications that anyone had broken into the house to harm him, no signs of struggle. Everything seemed too perfect, too undisturbed. As Sarah stood by Gregory's lifeless body, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. A man like Gregory, wealthy, yes, but also only 71 years old, and by all accounts in reasonable health, didn't just die in his sleep for no reason. His life had been full of excess, but he wasn't the kind of man to let his health slip away unnoticed. He had regular checkups, personal trainers, private doctors. Something didn't add up. Sarah glanced over at Jaime, who had been sitting in the corner of the room, her eyes red from crying. The young widow appeared devastated, her face a mixture of confusion and grief. "Miss Brooke," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm, "can you tell me what happened here last night?" Jaime looked up at Sarah, her face showing what appeared to be genuine distress. "I don't know," she stammered, her voice shaking. "He was fine. We had a drink and he went to bed. I didn't think there was anything wrong. He'd been feeling a little tired lately, but he didn't mention anything serious." Her voice cracked as she spoke, her hands wringing together. I don't understand. Why did this happen?" Sarah's eyes softened for a moment. She could see what appeared to be genuine concern in Jaime's eyes, but something didn't quite fit. There were no clear answers yet, no obvious cause of death. But Sarah knew that the autopsy would reveal more. The question was, what exactly had happened to Gregory Moses on the night of his death? Why had a man so full of life and vigor suddenly passed away in his sleep? The answers weren't clear yet, but Sarah knew one thing. The investigation had just begun. As the paramedics cleared the scene, and Gregory's body was transported to the medical examiner's office, Sarah turned to her team. "I want a full autopsy," she said. "Toxicology, everything. And I want to know everything about the wife, her background, her finances, her recent activity." One of the younger detectives nodded. "You think this wasn't natural?" Sarah paused, looking back at the bedroom where Gregory had died. "I think a 70-year-old billionaire doesn't just drop dead without a reason, and I think we need to find out what that reason is." Over the next several days, the investigation began to unfold in ways that would ultimately expose a carefully planned murder. The medical examiner's initial findings were inconclusive. Gregory had died of cardiac arrest, but the circumstances surrounding the arrest were unusual. His heart had simply stopped, but there were no underlying conditions that would explain such a sudden failure. The medical examiner ordered a full toxicology screen, which would take several weeks to complete. In the meantime, Sarah and her team began digging into Gregory's recent life, looking for anything that might explain his sudden death. One detail that caught Sarah's attention early on was the death of Gregory's dog, Leo, just 1 month prior. According to Jaime, Leo had simply grown old and died naturally. But when Sarah spoke with Gregory's veterinarian, Dr. Michael Stern, she learned something troubling. "Leo was in perfect health the last time I saw him," Dr. Stern told Sarah over the phone. "I examined him about 3 months ago for his regular checkup. His vitals were normal. No fever, no signs of illness. He was a healthy dog for his age." This contradicted Jaime's claim that Leo had been sick. Sarah made a note of the discrepancy and decided to pursue it further. She requested that Leo's body be exhumed for a necropsy and toxicology analysis. It was an unusual step, investigating a dog's death in a human homicide case, but Sarah's instincts told her it was necessary. The exhumation took place 1 week after Gregory's death. Leo's body was carefully removed from the estate grounds and transported to a veterinary pathology lab. The necropsy revealed traces of a powerful stimulant compound in Leo's system, specifically a combination of amphetamines and cardiac glycosides that would have caused his heart to race uncontrollably before failing. This wasn't a natural death. Leo had been poisoned. The discovery sent a chill through the investigation team. If Leo had been poisoned, what did that mean for Gregory? Sarah immediately ordered the medical examiner to prioritize the toxicology results for Gregory's body. When those results came back 2 weeks later, they confirmed Sarah's darkest suspicions. Gregory's system showed elevated levels of the same stimulant compounds found in Leo, specifically a dangerous combination of synthetic cathinones and digitalis derivatives. These substances, when combined, would cause severe cardiac stress, leading to arrhythmia and ultimately cardiac arrest. The dosage found in Gregory's system was consistent with lethal poisoning. This was not a natural death. This was murder. With the toxicology results in hand, Sarah's team shifted their focus entirely to Jaime Brooke. They began by examining her financial records. What they found was immediately suspicious. Within 48 hours of Gregory's death, a transfer of $1.2 million had been made from one of Gregory's accounts to Jaime's personal account. The transfer had been initiated using Gregory's online banking credentials, but the timing was deeply troubling. Why would such a large sum be transferred so quickly after his death and before any estate proceedings had begun? Further investigation revealed that Jaime had been listed as the primary beneficiary on Gregory's life insurance policy, a policy worth $15 million. The paperwork had been updated just 2 months after their wedding, in February 2024, around the same time that Leo had died. Jaime had also been designated as the executor of Gregory's estate, giving her control over his vast holdings in the event of his death. The financial motive was clear, but motive alone wasn't enough. Sarah needed evidence of premeditation and method. That's when her team made a breakthrough. The digital forensics unit had been examining Jaime's laptop and smartphone, which had been seized with a warrant. What they found was damning. Jaime's search history, dating back to late January 2024, included queries such as, what powder poison kills someone? How long does stimulant stay in bloodstream? Untraceable poisons that cause heart attack? How to kill a dog without it being obvious? These searches had been conducted over a period of several weeks, demonstrating a pattern of research and planning. The last search, How to Kill a Dog, had been conducted just 3 days before Leo's death. The picture was becoming disturbingly clear. Jaime had researched methods of poisoning, tested her approach on Leo, and then used the same method to kill Gregory. But the investigation didn't stop there. Detectives also discovered purchase records showing that Jaime had ordered synthetic cathinone compounds and digitalis powder from an overseas supplier in early February 2024. The packages had been delivered to a private mailbox she had rented under a false name. The final piece of evidence came from the physical search of the Moses estate. In the trash outside the main house, investigators found a small pill bottle with a prescription label that had been partially torn off. The bottle cap bore Jaime's fingerprints. Inside, traces of the same stimulant compounds found in both Gregory and Leo were detected. The evidence was overwhelming. Jaime Brooke had planned and executed the murder of Gregory Moses, and she had practiced on his dog first. On April 3, 2024, less than 3 weeks after Gregory's death, Detective Sarah Harris and her team arrested Jaime Brooke at the Moses estate. She was charged with first-degree murder, elder exploitation, and animal cruelty. The arrest made national headlines. The story of the young bride who had allegedly poisoned her elderly billionaire husband captivated the public. Media outlets dubbed it the Billionaire bride murder case, and speculation ran rampant about Jaime's motives and background. During her interrogation, Jaime's demeanor oscillated between calm composure and tearful breakdowns. At times, she appeared vulnerable and distraught, insisting that she loved Gregory and would never have harmed him. At other times, she was eerily detached, offering short, clipped answers to Sarah's questions. "I didn't do this," Jaime said repeatedly. "I loved him. Why would I hurt him?" But when confronted with the evidence, the search history, the financial transfers, the toxicology reports, Jaime went silent. Her attorney advised her not to answer any further questions, and the interrogation ended. Jaime was held without bail, deemed a flight risk given the substantial financial resources she now had access to. The case moved quickly through the legal system, propelled by the strength of the evidence and the high-profile nature of the crime. The trial of Jaime Brooke began in September 2024, just 6 months after Gregory's death. The courtroom was packed with journalists, members of the public, and representatives from Gregory's family. His sister, Joy Moses, now in her 80s, sat in the front row, her face a mask of grief and determination. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Marcus Welling, presented a methodical and damning case. They walked the jury through the timeline of events, from Jaime's initial meeting with Gregory to the calculated poisoning that ended his life. Expert witnesses testified about the toxicology findings, explaining how the combination of synthetic stimulants and cardiac glycosides would have caused Gregory's heart to fail. A forensic digital analyst presented Jaime's search history, showing the jury the chilling progression of her research. A financial expert detailed the money transfers and insurance policies, demonstrating the clear financial motive. Perhaps most powerfully, the prosecution called Gregory's veterinarian, Dr. Stern, who testified that Leo had been in perfect health just months before his death, contradicting Jaime's claims. The defense, led by attorney Rebecca Morales, attempted to paint Jaime as a victim in her own right, a young woman with a traumatic past who had been manipulated and exploited by a wealthy older man. They argued that Jaime had endured sexual abuse as a child, had been abandoned by her mother, and had survived on the streets before meeting Gregory. The defense suggested that Gregory had taken advantage of Jaime's vulnerability and that her actions, if she had indeed committed them, were the result of psychological trauma and coercion. "This is a young woman who never had a chance," Morales told the jury in her opening statement. "She was abused, neglected, and forced to survive in ways that no child should ever have to. When she met Gregory Moses, she saw an opportunity for safety and stability, but what she found was another man who wanted to control her." The defense called a psychologist who testified about the long-term effects of childhood sexual abuse and how trauma can impair judgment and decision-making. They argued that Jaime's actions, if proven, were not premeditated murder, but rather the desperate acts of a traumatized individual. But the prosecution's rebuttal was swift and decisive. "Trauma does not give someone the right to murder," Welling said in his closing argument. Yes, Jaime Brooke endured horrible things as a child, but she also made calculated, deliberate choices as an adult. She researched poisons, she purchased compounds, she tested them on an innocent animal, and then she used them to kill a man who trusted her, who loved her, who gave her everything. This was not a desperate act. This was cold-blooded murder for money. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. On October 18, 2024, they returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and muted applause. Jaime sat motionless, her face expressionless as the verdict was read. Joy Moses, seated in the front row, wept quietly. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later. The judge, citing the premeditated nature of the crime, the vulnerability of the victim, and the aggravating factor of elder exploitation, sentenced Jaime Brooke to 85 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was pronounced, Jaime showed no visible reaction. She stood in silence, her hands clasped in front of her, as bailiffs prepared to escort her from the courtroom. The aftermath of Gregory Moses's death and Jaime Brooke's conviction rippled through multiple spheres, legal, financial, and personal. Gregory's empire, which had once been a symbol of success and ambition, began to unravel. Lawsuits emerged from business partners who claimed Gregory had made verbal agreements that were never formalized. Creditors came forward seeking payment on outstanding debts. Investors, spooked by the scandal, pulled out of projects that Gregory had initiated. The business he had spent decades building was slowly disassembled, piece by piece. David Hurton, Gregory's longtime friend and confidant, struggled to come to terms with the loss. "I never knew Jaime could be capable of this," David said in an interview months after the trial. "All for money. Maybe it would have been better if he'd never gotten married. At least then he wouldn't have ended up like this." With Gregory gone and his sister Joy too elderly to manage the empire, the responsibility of overseeing what remained of the Moses holdings fell to David. Joy, now in her mid-80s, made the decision to transfer control of the family business to David, trusting him to manage it with integrity. But Joy didn't simply walk away from her brother's legacy. Using what remained of the family wealth, she helped establish the Gregory Moses Foundation, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about elder exploitation and financial abuse. The foundation works with law enforcement, social services, and advocacy groups to educate the public about the warning signs of exploitation and to provide resources for victims. Gregory was brilliant in business, but he was vulnerable in his personal life, Joy said at the foundation's launch event. He wanted love, and someone took advantage of that. "I don't want his death to be in vain. I want it to serve as a warning to others." The foundation has since funded research into elder abuse, supported legislative efforts to strengthen protections for vulnerable adults, and provided grants to organizations working on the front lines of this issue. It stands as a complex legacy, an acknowledgement of Gregory's failings, and a commitment to preventing similar tragedies. The story of Gregory Moses raises profound questions about trust, vulnerability, and the dangers of transactional relationships. Gregory was a man who spent his entire life building walls to protect himself, walls made of wealth, control, and emotional distance. He believed that by keeping people at arm's length, by never fully trusting anyone, he could protect himself from betrayal. But in the end, those very walls left him isolated and vulnerable. When he finally opened himself up to someone, when he finally allowed himself to believe in love, it was to a person who saw him not as a partner, but as a target. This case also highlights the particular vulnerabilities faced by elderly individuals, especially those with significant wealth. Elder exploitation is a growing concern in the United States, with estimates suggesting that billions of dollars are stolen from older adults each year through scams, fraud, and exploitation by caregivers or romantic partners. Gregory's case is extreme, but it reflects a broader pattern: predators seeking out lonely, wealthy individuals and manipulating them for financial gain. From a criminal psychology perspective, Jaime Brooke's case presents a troubling profile. Her traumatic childhood undoubtedly shaped her worldview and her survival strategies, but at some point, survival tactics evolved into predatory behavior. The calculated nature of her actions, the research, the practice run on Leo, the timing of financial maneuvers, demonstrates a level of planning and cold rationality that goes beyond mere opportunism. Some experts have suggested that Jaime exhibits traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder, including a lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, and a willingness to harm others for personal gain. Others have argued that her actions were the result of complex trauma and a desperate need for security in a world that had never provided it. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a person shaped by trauma who made a series of calculated criminal choices. The legal system, in this case, functioned as intended. The investigation was thorough, the evidence was overwhelming, and justice was served. But the emotional and human cost cannot be quantified. Gregory Moses, for all his flaws, was a human being who deserved to live out his final years in peace. His death was not just a crime statistic, it was a tragedy born of loneliness, misplaced trust, and predatory manipulation. Today, Jaime Brooke is serving her sentence at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. She has not granted interviews and has maintained her silence since her conviction. The estate of Gregory Moses has been largely liquidated, with remaining assets divided among creditors, charitable organizations, and a trust established for Joy Moses's care. David Hurton continues to manage what remains of the Moses business interests, though the empire Gregory built has been reduced to a fraction of its former size. The mansion where Gregory died has been sold, its opulent rooms now home to a new family, unaware of the dark history that unfolded within its walls. This case serves as a stark reminder that wealth cannot buy safety, that isolation breeds vulnerability, and that trust, once misplaced, can have fatal consequences. It is a chilling true story of manipulation, murder, and the dark side of human desire, a real crime documentary etched into the annals of dark history. Gregory Moses's life and death remain a cautionary tale, a piece of investigative documentary evidence showing how even the most powerful among us can fall victim to those who see them not as people, but as opportunities. The criminal psychology behind Jaime's actions, the meticulous crime investigation that brought her to justice, and the unsolved emotional questions that linger. Why did Gregory, so cautious his entire life, let his guard down? All contribute to a story that continues to fascinate and horrify in equal measure.